fundamental to every franchise system, it all comes down to franchisee profitability. And for franchise systems, emerging franchisors, sometimes the biggest disconnect is getting franchisee data and your most important obligation, which is coaching franchisees to profitability, which enhances your royalties, creates validation. And so today we're going to talk to Gretchen Johnson, top to bottom bookkeeping. We're going to focus on steps you should be taking to prepare for your item 19, getting the data from your franchisees and coaching them to profitability. All right, Gretchen. So we welcome, by the way. It's good. It's good to speak. So we're getting through FDD renewals. I'm sure you're inundated by franchisors asking about data for their item 19, what they could be doing to improve their data collection for next year. And most importantly, franchisors that are integrating top to bottom in terms of their processes and franchisee bookkeeping. So this is, I think, a very timely conversation that we're going to have today.
Yeah, absolutely. We are on the tail end of FDD renewal season and definitely fielding those questions, just like you were saying. And we are always reiterating with our clients, the most important thing you can do is tell a story with the data. Don't just slap copies of P&Ls into that item 19, help paint the picture for what you want prospective franchisees looking at your system to see.
Well, as a franchise law firm, I think one commonality, especially for emerging brands, and it's always a learning process, but the cadence and things we'll hear is like, Charles, at next year, my franchisees aren't getting me the data on a timely basis. There's a lack of conformity between general ledger accounts. They're not timely reporting. And as franchisors grow, they do realize those KPIs, those data points are critical, right? Mm-hmm. If you coach franchisees monthly, you get those warning signs of revenue problems, you get positive indicators, you could start tracking where maybe marketing efforts are lacking. And then most important, I think franchisors realize at a certain point in their growth cycle that they can grow more by focusing less on franchise sales and more on franchisee unit performance. Mm-hmm. So, Gretchen, what are some of the fundamentals that franchisors should be thinking about in terms of data collection, franchisee coaching, and then some of the things where you see top to bottom, like helping out brands?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the number one thing that we're seeing trending in the industry and becoming more common, and as quickly as you can, getting it in your FDD that you are collecting P&Ls from each unit and having that be part of the agreement that ideally, if you can get in there from day one, and every franchisee is providing that to you, but as soon as you can make that a standard for your brand, the better. Where we can come in and help support with that is with our clients, with franchisees working with us, we can ask for their permission to share financials to the franchisor. We like to work with brands where we can partner on both sides of that relationship because if we're only talking to the franchisee, we're only getting half the picture of where the brand is headed. So if we can help facilitate that, we're happy to do so. And then there are a lot of great softwares out there that can aggregate data, create wonderful dashboards and KPI metrics and all of that good stuff as well. So we're big proponents of bringing those into systems so that it's an automated process. And on the same day every month, on the 20th, P&Ls are getting pulled and analysis is being run. So that way it's not a step where someone's having to send an email and take time out of their day to make that happen. It can just happen automatically every single month.
Well, I think that's the most powerful. We were talking, one of the vendors you use, and someone supports FranCamp, Quivinci. And what I loved about the conversation there and about what you're doing is at the franchisor level, I think there's nothing more important than that dashboard of franchisee performance, and a dashboard where the metrics are harmonized. They reflect the right accounts, and then you could start evaluating how to best assist franchisees. When you're working with franchisees and you come into a new system, what are some of the pain points you see that or solvable and things that brands should be focused on?
Absolutely. I think it comes down to a very foundational level of, are all of your franchisees using the same chart of accounts? So most brands have one put together, they provide it to their franchisees, but then it's a matter of, is their bookkeeper adhering to that? Are they using that consistently? A lot of times, like when you bring in a QVinci, there are options to map chart of accounts that don't match, but it adds a pain point there. So if you can remove that from day one and ensure all of your locations are using that same template, that is a huge first step. And we're always doing that with our brands. We're following that chart of accounts when a new franchisee is coming to us. If they've been open for 4 or 5 years and their chart of accounts doesn't match, that's one of the very first things that we're doing in their cleanup process, is getting them back to that brand standard. So that way you can compare apples to apples between locations. And using that software when you're looking at a dashboard, and know that when you're looking at marketing for location 521, we're talking about the same marketing dollars for location 522 as well.
And when you come in, Gretchen, is there reluctance or turbulence with franchisees? They're hesitant, then they're happy. How does that relationship work out?
Yeah. I mean, we see both sides of things. Some franchise owners, they say, whatever is going to be best for my business, whatever is going to get me the financials and the data I need to grow my unit, fine, so be it. Sometimes we have some pushback. And so that's where we will bring in the franchisor and have a conversation about how can we get this set up where, from a brand perspective, we're able to compare those apples to apples, but maybe the franchisee at this particular location is able to drill down. A lot of times we see this around marketing spend. The franchisee may want to see it broken out very specifically by print advertising, if they're still doing radio advertising, digital ads, things along those lines, whereas maybe that all feeds up to just one larger bucket inside of the P&L. So we talk about, is there an option to create sub-accounts where everything still feeds up to that brand standard level, but that individual franchisee can see that the drill down there for their spend.
And then as the franchisees go along in the life cycle, what are some of the insights they see by the improved accounting or the improved bookkeeping?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So the biggest thing that we're able to see for our brand partners is that they're able to create mastermind groups amongst their franchisees. And this could be people who are performing on a similar level, similar part of the country, or it could be, hey, these 3 franchisees had this problem, they solved it. Here are 7 more franchisees struggling with that same issue, whether it be their cost of goods is too high or their labor is way out of whack. What's happening here? And they can partner those locations up and hear from each other. Franchise business coaches are great. They're there to be boots on the ground. But sometimes an individual franchisee might just have the solution for their buddy next door.
I didn't think of that. So talk to me again, not about a specific client, but I love the concept of like using the data to pair franchisees, those mastermind groups. What have you seen where that works with franchise systems? I love that.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can pick and pull apart data from all different perspectives. We've seen it done based on geography. So obviously different regions in the US have very different landscapes when it comes to cost of living, labor costs, supply cost, shipping costs, things along those lines. So sometimes it makes sense to break down by geography. Other times it makes sense to break down based off of top line revenue. So your 5 million plus locations, your $1 to $2 million locations, especially, a lot of brands talk about, how do I get my franchisee to that first million? We want them to hit that magic 7-figure revenue number as fast as possible. So when you're able to pair up franchisees who just accomplished that to help bring those who are in that $800 to $900 range, that's where we can really see growth and progress take off.
Gretchen, if you had to say like buckets of data, right? Say I have a franchise system, we're 100 units. I want to pair up franchisees because I see different issues for different franchisees. Maybe I have growing brands, I have brands that are lagging on revenue. You brought up cost of goods sold, and maybe those are the primary categories. What are those financial buckets, 4 or 5 of them, where when you see the data points, those are good buckets to say we should align franchisees and coach, because these are positive indicators or warning signs that we need to focus on?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say every brand's a little bit different. And we have these conversations often with our partners because I will go to brand conferences and help present or coach one-on-one with franchisees at their annual conference. But the big ones we see over and over again, number one is cost of goods sold. That's always going to be your number one thing that you're looking at on the P&L and controlling that. If your COGS is way out of the brand range for percentage, that should be the number one thing you're tackling. The second thing we see is labor percentage. And third, I would say, is marketing spend. Because even though it's really painful and hard, if you're not seeing that top line revenue yet, the last thing you should cut is your marketing spend. That's what's going to help continue to generate demand for your business. So I would say those are the first three that we typically see.
Right. And the last one that you bring up, the marketing spend, I think that's where we see the biggest pain point. And I think there's a couple of factors. One, if a franchisor oversold in the sense of underestimating what the marketing spend should be,
Mhm.
and ensuring the franchisee has the right capital to spend that money in those formative years. And then also we see on the flip side too, very sophisticated franchisees of, multi-unit operators that come in and say, hey, if I hit, and I'm not, if the FDD says I have to spend 2% of gross sales, but if I'm overachieving and hitting certain sales numbers, it's going to be diminishing returns on the 2% or whatever. So those data points come into play. But I think for emerging brands, I think one of the biggest mistakes is underestimating the startup marketing and not coaching the franchisees on not only following our system, but here's how much you're going to spend, here's where you're going to spend it, or even we're going to take the money from you and spend it. What do you see on those points?
We see things across the board. We're starting to see more and more of a mix of having a brand marketing fund that is part of, your royalty is X% per month, then the marketing national advertising fund is X%. And then locally, we require you to spend an additional X percentage or dollar amount. And franchisee in said territory, you can choose how you spend those local marketing dollars because you know your local market best. Maybe that's being physically present at community-wide events, festivals, things along those lines, or maybe it is digital advertising in your space. So we're seeing more and more of a mix as far as how brands are advertising, both on a national and local level.
Gretchen, if you had to, I'm sure it's more than three, but if you had to give examples of, from the franchisee side, when you're working with them, what are some of their frustrations where they feel like the franchisor is either not evaluating data the right way or providing the right guidance, and maybe they have a credible complaint or concern? What are some of those items?
I would say a lot of times the franchisor just doesn't understand how hard it is in my market to do X, Y, or Z, which is completely understandable because usually the franchisor has had 1 to 5, maybe 10 successful locations in their geographic region of the country. And while there are, spoke about them earlier, there are differences regionally across the US. There's a lot of similarities at the end of the day, just from a human psychology perspective. All pretty much buy things the same way. And so I think it's important for franchisors, if there's someone who's really struggling, to nail down what that is. And usually it does come down to the money side of things. 9 times out of 10, that franchisee is not profitable. And that is the biggest pain point there is. When you get a franchisee to profitability, it's amazing how few problems there are at the end of the day. And so when you can get in there, and sometimes that means that you, especially in an emerging brand, you as founder of this brand, maybe you taking a trip to that location, being boots on the ground for 5 days and being an observer and just simply asking questions. If you were me, what's the number one thing that you would change today? And not necessarily asking the franchisee that, but also possibly asking their employees that question to see, if you were in charge for 1 day, what would be the first thing you change? Just see. A lot of times it's surprising how many similar answers you'll get across the board.
Great. I think that's some of the most amazing advice. I'm not just saying it. I thought my question was mediocre, and I'm like, wow, that's a great point, right? And I think that brands do. They especially in the emerging stage, you need to have that heightened caution that I'm entering a new market, and the franchisee is going to have a little more turbulence. And I've seen it. I mean, we're a franchise firm, but when years ago I'd taken over a franchise system, we even opened up a corporate location to test it out before any future expansion or further expansion. And what was shocking to me was how difficult it was to gain traction with marketing.
Yes.
I was used to it just being very streamlined. And in a new market, you're in many ways reinventing what's going on. So I think that advice is critical, especially on the new couple of things that you said. Number one, being boots on the ground and going to that market so they understand the franchisee sees you there working with them in the new market. Two, not assuming everything's just going to replicate in a new market. And then your other point, which is foundational to everything, which is you need to make them profitable, and then all the other problems go away. Gretchen, I love that. And I appreciate you guys will be at Fran Camp this coming June and in Miami. In terms of top to bottom and the services you guys offer, if anyone's interested, of course, reach out to Gretchen. But the key really is this now is a great time also in terms of just having a conversation as to best practices, where your team could help. And also as FDDs are rebooted, whether or not make services mandatory for accounting services or not mandatory. So I definitely think that's a really good time to have that conversation.
Absolutely. Yes. We're in the phase where we can take a breath. Tax day has passed us. I know a lot of people are on extension still, but the first wave of it is past us. And I know for a lot of brands, FDD season is wrapping up. They're getting those renewals in. So now is a good time to start planning and not wait until the last minute scramble next year to do it all over again.
Correct. Well, and we're just finishing on the renewal season, and right when it for the emerging brands and we try to have the conversations in July and August, but having the data, having the synthesis between franchisee, general ledger accounts, having the reporting data, it just gives so many more opportunities to tell a transparent story with your item 19, the good and the bad and the opportunity and the deeper dive KPIs. So I appreciate that, everyone, and I appreciate everyone on today's conversation. And for everyone here today, if you haven't signed up, Fran Camp is coming up. It's June 1 to 3. It's actually going to be pretty amazing. It's at a great venue. We're going to have a great time, but also I think from a foundational level, it's going to be a great opportunity to take advantage of what I'll call a next level of AI franchise sales. And Gretchen and her team will be here. And so it's not only about sales, it's about franchisee profitability and growing your system. So for everyone out there, I appreciate it. Gretchen, it was great meeting. I think you've given me, at least for the year, some of the best advice there, which I love that boots on the ground advice.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys, and everyone, if you haven't signed up for Fran Camp, definitely reach out to our team. I appreciate everyone joining us today.